Welcome everyone to today's AuditNet Training Without Travel webinar, IDEA software training via practical application, presented jointly by AuditNet and Richard Cascarino and Associates. Today's webinar is the last in the series, and it's on Advanced Script Writing in IDEA, Part 2. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm founder and owner of AuditNet, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today's presenter and subject matter expert is Richard Cascarino, principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates. Let me have Richard introduce himself and give you a brief overview of his background, and then I'll cover the housekeeping items, disclaimer, and important information about the AuditNet IDEA partnership. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Most of you, in fact all of you who are on this particular webinar were on the previous webinar, so I'm not going to labor who I am and what my background is. You can see it in front of you. Suffice to say that we're going to be going through the scripts, and we'll be doing some hands-on where you capture and some where I'll bring it up and you've got the copies on your one and you can go through what we're looking at. But in addition, you have within the slides the text of the scripts that we're using. So if you have not yet received them, you can capture them yourself. The only reason I sent them out to you was to save you some typing. Okay, let me hand you back to Jim and he'll take you through the housekeeping, just in case you've forgotten.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Basically, the slides you should have received them this morning. If you didn't receive them, please let me know. I'll try to resend them to you. I may just have to remove the one file on the macros, which may be blocking. Causing blocking in your email system. But we are recording today's webinar. You will receive a copy of the recording, and that will be coming to you hopefully by tomorrow. Also, because we're under NASBA rules, we are required to ask polling questions during the webinar. CPE certificates will be sent to the email to those who answer all the polling questions. If you're joining us from a tablet device today, you may not be able to answer the polling questions. You will just have to accumulate your answers and send them to us in an email. You can submit questions via the chat box and we'll answer them either during or at the conclusion of the webinar. I will be watching those questions and passing them over to Richard to address, usually at the time that we take a break for polling questions. So you also have the opportunity to provide feedback after the webinar is over via a satisfaction survey. Please take the time to fill that out so that we can improve our webinars in the future. The next slide provides information about the disclaimer. And the disclaimer is a standard disclaimer. So again, that was in the slides. I'm not going to read that. However, at this point, I would like to cover the AuditNet IDEA partnership. AuditNet has entered into an agreement to provide access to subscriber content to IDEA Premium supported users. If you're currently a Premium supported IDEA user, you can access the AuditNet content at no cost. For more information, go to the AuditNet site for details on how to log in and access more than 2,300 templates. You will also find in your slide deck there is a slide on supplemental information which has a link to the video that explains how to access AuditNet via IDEA. So at this point I'd like to turn the floor back to Richard so he can cover the final webinar in our series on IDEA software. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Just before we start, may I say that occasionally you might find that there's a very short dead spot in the sound. That if that happens, it's because I've muted my microphone while I'm coughing and spluttering. Having arrived here from Africa into snow, I've managed to get myself a cold and a cough. So I apologize in advance if that happens. What we're going to be covering today: creating interactive dialogues. Dialogues where you, using the dialogue, can ask questions of the person executing the script. So you can ask them to click on a button or to choose from a list, etc. We'll also take a look at finding data, how we can find data, how you can create a script to find data. We can look at importing and exporting, doing data analysis, reporting, charting and graphing, and finally looking at fixing errors within the data and doing it using those script files. Okay, so as per usual, we will start off by starting off. We'll fire up IDEA, and then we'll go and open a file. And this time the file that we're going to open, I'm going to go and pick up my customer MDB, which is a Microsoft Access file. So I'm going to do my file from my desktop into my import assistant, define it as a Microsoft Access file, and then go and pick it up as usual from the tutorial one, and there's my customer file. I'm going to pick up database. Obviously, if you've already done this, as you can see over on my left hand side, I've got customer database and customer database 1. If you've already done it, it will simply create you the same file definition with a 1 on the end, or a 2 on the end, or a 3, depending on how many you have. Okay, nothing complicated there. So we're going to do some analysis on this file, and what we'll do is we'll go and do some summarization and summarize the customer database by country, accumulating the credit limits, and you should know how to do that. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. For those of you who couldn't remember, it was summarization. We're going to do it by country, not by customer number, so we'll change that to country. Accumulating the credit limits, we don't want any more, so we'll do a quick summarization, and I'm going to call it summarization. And it's done. And everyone should be with us at this point. Okay, now, as we did on the previous webinar, if we look at that history file, we've got the data file on the properties and we've got the history. If we look at the history, we can see in there the customer database access import, and down here we have the IDEA script. If I close that and look at the summarization, down here we have the IDEA script. So this is a narrative telling us what we did. We picked up the file, number of records 33, control file, no control totals, control total, no control totals, summarization from where it came from, number of records, numeric field to total, etc., and then the IDEA script. Now, we want to create a macro for this, so we've got the summarization code. I'll highlight that, and I'll right-click in there, and I'll simply say I want to copy all of the IDEA script. Now, I don't have to take it all. I could take just that bit for that selected task, or just those 4 or 5 lines I want to select. In this case, I'll take everything. And it's now created that. And if you look, because it's said all script, it's picked up the script for the import, and it's picked up the script for the summarization. So we have a subroutine called summarization, function summarization, end function, and we have a subroutine for the import, function access import, end function. And up in the main script, the main body of the program, we're saying call access import, call that function, using that file, call summarization, and do the summarization on that database. Okay, and there it is there. That's the database that we're opening, and that's the file that we're going to import. Okay, so nothing complicated there. And again, we can save that. So we can do it from the button bar, or we can do it from the file and save as. And I'm going to save it as first try. Now, you'll see on mine I've got firsttry.exe and firsttry.iss. I want it to be firsttry.iss. It already exists. Do I wish to replace it? Yes. Okay. Nothing complicated. We've done this before. So now we want to do something a bit fancier. I'm going to close that and delete those two files. Okay. What I want to do is create an interactive dialogue. And when I'm creating an interactive dialogue, let me jump back into my idea, into my slides. What I want to do is display the dialog box up on the screen so that the user can see it and do something with whatever controls I've put onto that dialog. It could be a button, it could be a radio button, it could be a pull-down list, whatever. The idea then is to take that information and pass it back to the subroutine or the function which made the call when it got to that stage. Now, by preference, we tend to use message box, either input box or a display setup dialog. Why? Because that's the easy way to do it. And as a lazy auditor, I'm quite happy to find something lazy to do with it. So what I'm going to do, for those of you who've already got the slides, I'm going to go into a transaction agent database aging dialog. Okay. Now, the easy way to do it is to go into my IDEA macro, my IDEA script editor. Okay. And what I want to do is insert a new dialog. And there's my new dialog box. And again, we did this very briefly on Tuesday. Over on the right hand side you'll see we have properties. There's the name, the title. It tells me where it is. If I move that around it will show where it's moving to. This is where it's going to be on the screen. The size, I can stretch it, I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, I can do whatever I want to it. Okay. And it's going to come up with a function name of new dialog. Now I can change that function name to anything I choose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a simple dialog box with 3 radio buttons. So there's radio button number 1, and I simply click on it and drag it in. And you can see up in the properties it's given me a title of option button, an ID of option button 1, and a group ID of option button group. Now what I want to do is I want to create this to ask you which color you want. Okay? And the way we're going to do that is to change the name, the title of that. I'm going to start off with my first one, which is going to be red. So my button now says red. I'll take another radio button and put that one in. This one is now going to be a radio button called blue. So the title is going to be blue. And finally I'll take a third one and put it in, and it's going to be green. Nothing complicated so far. I'll pull those up so they're kind of vertically underneath each other. Now what I also want to do is add in an OK button and the cancel button. And what we now have is a dialog that will ask someone to enter a button, but I want to group all of these together. When I ask it in the dialog, which one of these buttons have you pressed, I want them all in the same group. So if I look at red, you'll see on the group ID it says option button group 1. I'm going to call it group colors. I'll look on blue and I'll put it into the same button, the same group rather. And the same thing with my green. So I've now got the dialog box the way I want it to appear. Now I can go back into my source code and start putting in what I want it to do. And you'll see that on your next slide. I'll bring it up here so you can see it. And there's the script. Okay, create the dialog, dim my dialog as a digital dialog test, display the dialog on the screen. Now I can go through this, you can type it in if you so desire. Okay, some of you have just received the slides. As I said, you can type it in if you so desire, but you don't have to. Because what I can do is I can go and open up from the slides that you just received. You received a whole pile of macros, depending on where you put the macros. And up here we should find one called colors. And there it is, where it says create the dialog, dim my dialog as a dialog test, display the dialog on screen, dim the results as a long character, and the results will be a dialog over here, my dialog. Then we'll want to check whether that is an OK or a cancel, make sure that the user hasn't cancelled. So if the result is equal to 0, that means they've cancelled, we'll exit that subroutine. If they haven't cancelled, then I can end the if and carry on and say, okay, now, what did they pick? Did they pick 1, 2, or 3? So I'll dim my choice as an integer. Choice will be my dialog group colors. Okay? And you'll see if I brought this whole thing in, there's my digital test, red, blue, and green, etc. So I'm into my dialog, display the selection, select the case choice, and then I'm going to say message box, you chose red, if case is 0. If case is 1, you chose blue. If case is 2, you chose 3. End the select, and then end that subroutine. So if I run it now, it should work. There's red, blue, or green. If I cancel, it's taking me straight out. If I run it again, red, blue, or green. If I say I want blue, okay, you chose blue. Okay, so I chose blue, so the case came up as 1. And therefore it worked. Okay, but it's not difficult if you haven't got the macros. All of that text that's on there is on your slides. So you can simply capture that in and you'll see how it works. Okay. Now I ran colors. I could, of course, have taken all of that text copied it, gone into the one that I called New Script, and pasted it in there. And instead of running colors, I could have run New Script, and it tells me I've got a problem. Now the problem is I don't have my dialogue. I've got new dialogue. Okay. If you look there, it says my dialogue is DLG test. There's DLG test. My dialogue at the moment would have to be new dialogue. And if I ran it now, I'm back into my red, blue, or green. I chose green. Okay, so the dim my dialogue as is the name that you gave this dialogue. I left it as new dialogue. I could have saved it as a different name. I could have given it a different name there, as I did on this one when I first created it. But whichever, the definition within the source code that says my dialogue that I am going to bring up on the screen has to be the name that I've given this dialog box. So I will then display the result being my dialog, which is in this case new dialog. Then I said if the result is a 0, that means they've clicked on something. What did they click on? Well, if they clicked on the OK, that was 1. If they clicked on the cancel, that was a 0. I'll rephrase that. If they clicked on the OK, that was a 0. If they clicked on the cancel, that was a 1. So if the result is 0, then end the subroutine and carry on. If it is a 1, cancel out. Okay. Then it says go get the selection. My choice is going to be an integer. My choice will be that group colors. Remember when we did in the dialog and we picked those, we made the group ID group colors. So what it's saying is my choice is group colors out of my dialog, and then case 0, case 1, case 2, depending on which one you chose. And it's as simple as that. Okay. Now that's not terribly complicated. If we want to make it more complicated, then instead of having little buttons that say red, green, or blue, what we could do, if I close down that IDEA script, and let me go and open my second color one. You'll see we had colors. I'm now going to say colors pick and bring it up. And what we're doing here is we've created in our dialog, instead of having radio buttons, we've created a dialog box. Okay? And that dialog box will contain whatever we tell it to contain. And we've got our OK button, and we've got our cancel button. Now how does that work? If I look at my main, you'll see in my main I've defined a list of items from which the user can then select. So I've said here are 5 colors. Color, which is actually 6. Color 0 is red, color 1 is orange, color 2 is yellow, color 3 is green, color 4 is blue, color 5 is purple. Then I need to have my dialog box, so I'm going to create an object to receive the output. And in exactly the same way, if I was creating a new dialog box now, I would go and insert a new dialog. Now I've got my sample dialog. The name is new dialog. At that point I could have changed it to sample dialog, which is up there. In this case, what I'm going to do now, instead of putting in a normal box, I'm going to do a drop-down combo box. And then I'll add in my OK button and my cancel button. Let's move that over a little bit so it can actually be seen. And if I look at that OK box, sorry, not the OK box. If I look at the dialog box, you'll see it's a drop-down list box number 1 using an attached list. Okay, I'll go back into my code. There is my list. I dimmed its colors and defined it all. In the dialog, if I looked at that, my attached list was going to be colors brackets. And I'm going to call this thing color select. So in this one I could stretch that, make it slightly bigger to fit in the things. And I'm going to call it, my attached list will be colors, open brackets, close brackets. And my ID will be color list. Now what does that mean? Well, I've now made this dialog the same as my sample dialog, so I don't actually need that. I'll delete it, and I'll leave it with that. If I run this now you'll notice you cannot run it from inside the dialog box. I've got to go back into my source code, and I can run it from here. And there's my pull-down list. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. If I click on blue, blue goes up, and it tells me I've selected blue as the color. If I run it again, and I chose an orange, orange goes up, and it tells me I chose orange. Okay, so I could do this with any kind of dialog. This could be months of the year, or it could be depots, it could be country districts, it could be sales reps, it could be anything I choose to come up in that list, where I will click it and say OK. And under normal circumstances within my main, I wouldn't want to then say, message box, you selected this. But what I would do is I would then take that input and use that into an analysis, into an extract, looking for sales for salesman number 52, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, so I'm now allowing the person who's running this script, and remember I can compile this and hand it over to an auditor who doesn't have idea, or to a manager or whatever, and say run this one, and you can then click on these and it will extract the information that you want. Okay, and that brings us to our first polling question. You didn't think you were going to get away from polling questions simply because this was going to be the last episode. So we'll launch it. A compiled IDEA script takes the form of an object file, an exe file, an ISI file, an ISS file. We have 83% voted. I'll close the file and share the results. And as you can see, we're sitting with 67%, well, as I hope you could see. The poll should be showing, but if it's not, we have 67% saying an exe file. This wasn't so much a test of what I've said today, it's what you could remember from the previous one. Because if you remember, on Tuesday, once we got to this stage, we said File, build colorspick.exe, executable file, save it. Okay, so it's now created and saved that. Now just in case you believe that it's actually a trick, I'm going to actually shut down the whole thing and go and find it and run it. colorspick.exe, and there it is. Now I don't have IDEA running on this machine at all at the moment, but if I run it, if I execute the program, I should get it to execute. We have the exe file. Which is not running. Still on the quick poll screen. Let me take you off the quick poll screen. I clicked on it, but it didn't actually shift. Okay, you're now looking at my screen. If I go in and look for colors, scan, colorspick. Here's my colorspick.exe, and if I fire it off, it should give me that interactive dialog, which for some reason it's not giving me. Oh, the perversity of inanimate objects. Guaranteed, when you want it to do it, it's not going to do it. Let me go back into my macros and pick up my color script, colorspick. I can save it, of course, as a compiled file first. And then I could save as, or I could build colorspick.exe, colorspick.exe, which is sitting in that macros. If I now go in on documents, in my case down to IDEA documents, my IDEA documents, projects, and I go into my webinars, and look at my macros. Apologies, I'm in IDEA course, of course. Macros. And I look at my color picks. Here's my color picks exe. When I run that, I get it coming up. And that would have happened regardless of whether I had IDEA running or not. So I click cancel and cancel out of it. Okay. Now that was simply going in and creating that type of interactive dialogue, and it literally is as simple as that. It's not a complicated thing. Let me close down the new scripts and go into there and look at the dialogues. All we did was we created a dialogue that looked like whatever we wanted it to look like. We had to name it appropriately. So in this case, the name was Sample Dialogue. Okay. Title was Sample Dialogue Box. And we added in a variety of dialogue tools. In this case, we took one which happened to be a drop-down box, drop-down combo box. The name is combo box, and if we look, we said the attached list that will go into there is called colors, and the ID will be color select. And having done it, it was simply a question of saying, here are colors, and then defining the dialog box, and then reacting to the user's input. Now, at that point there where it says react to the user's input, then if I said if it's -1, then I didn't pick the appropriate color. If it is 1, then I picked it appropriately, and I'll give you that message. Where that says message, that's the bit that I would then say in that subroutine and go back into my next routine within my main dialogue to do whatever it is I want to do. So the question then would be, what would you want to do? Well, for example, let me close that. One of the things that we could do is to do a straightforward search for a string of characters. So I'll open a file, a macro. You could type it all in yourself, but let me pick up a search for characters. You can either type it all in or you can do it yourself. If I close that down temporarily and go into data, first thing I'm going to have to do is pick a file. So what file am I going to use? I'm going to use my customers. Funnily enough, that's why we brought them in. So there's my customer database. And you can now see I've got a whole pile of things highlighted because I've got a file, and I could say search. Search for the customer number, and I could say search for the customer number. I'm going to use about the search tasks, Boolean operators, etc. I simply want to say if the customer number is equal to something. Okay, so I can create an extraction database, I can look in other databases, and so on. Going back into my script, what would it look like? Well, there's my working directory, client working directory. Define the old path. Delete the old path, so I'll take that out in case I've already done it before. Open the database. There's my database, and it's my sample customers. Check for errors. If DB is nothing, then end. In other words, if it can't find the database, stop. Okay. End if. Select the task type. So the task I'm going to do is a do search. That will be my task. I can set do search equal to database search. Okay. Configure the task. Do search, add field company, do search on the records, and look for the word jewel, okay, and open that path and send it out. So here we've got the open path. Define it as a database. There's the database, there's my client open path, etc. Determine if the file exists. There's that delete old path. Remember up here we said old path, delete the old file, delete old path. Well, what we were doing was saying, go down here, and there's my subroutine delete old path. The file name will be a string. Dim the path check it there. If the length of the path check is is greater than 1, then it's there. Then I'm deleting the old copy of whatever it is. I'll kill the file path and end the if. I'm going very rapidly through these because this is not a Visual Basic course, but I'll give you references to where you can get more details on how to do that. If I run it now, it's deleting the old copy because I've already got one in there. It's done the search, and here is my search result. So if I look at that search result, if I bring it up, I'm going to shut off the sound for a second. Sorry, so that I could cough. There's the database that I searched, record number, the field name, and the text. Now I was looking for jewel. There's fine jewellery, fine jewels, corner jewellery case, Belgian jewellery, fine jewellers, etc. Okay. So these are the files. That was the result of the search. And these are, remember, I created the search sample, and there they are there. The ones that I've already selected, all with the jewels in it. And you can see I've got 95 records down at the bottom there, out of the original customer file. My customer database was 341. Now that was doing an alpha search. As I say, I could have done it through here, and I could have said I want to search on the customer number within that database, and then I can tell it I want to create an extraction database and what I want to search for. So that's how to do each of the search tasks. Okay. And I could have done that by saying set the macro on, macro record on, do it, and that's what would have come out. Or I could have said do the search, then go in and have a look at the text, at the results, have a look at the IDEA script and copy that. Okay. So, to give you an idea, that was one version that we did. We did it using a character search. I can also open another one. Instead of doing a search by character, we could have done a search by date or a search numeric. If I do a search numeric, what I'm looking for is, there's my sample, I'm doing the same things. So once you've done this, once you've set it up for interrogating that file, overwrite if I've already got it, highlight if it's not there, then I can say configure the task, and I can put in whatever I want. I want to do a numeric search looking at credit limits. I want to do an alpha search looking at part of the customer name. I want to do a date search saying if it's greater than this. I can do a Boolean search saying if it's this and that or that. Okay. So again, we're doing a clear memory, we're performing a task, and I'm running it for 1,000. So in this case, it's deleting that old copy that I've got, and it tells me I've got a file access error, where it says kill file path. Okay. So once again, if it's trying to find whether the file exists and delete the file, it's telling me I cannot kill that file because I haven't defined the file. So I'd have to go back in and redefine that file path. So it will protect you if it can. If we look at that delete old file path, and if I look at the original one, which was deleting old file path, it had to define the database and delete old file path as string, If I go back into that numeric search, there's my dim file path, path check as string. But if I look at the source code here, delete old file path as string, dim path check as string, path check equals, and I look down here, you'll see it's slightly different. Okay. So there's the difference between the two. And it's always worth trying it before you hand it over to someone else and saying, this is a working version. If I go, let me close those two down. If I go and say I want to open another one, and let's say we've done character search, we've done a numeric search, let's take a look at a date search. So we'll search date. And this time what it's doing is it's looking for the date to be between in a certain range. And again, it's telling me it's invalid because I've already got that database in use. So what I'd have to do is close that down and close that down. And then I can run my script. Line 42, the database name is either invalid. Now that's that open database DB path. So I would need to look at that and find out what I've done with that DB path. And the way I can do that is I can go through here and I can say find. Locate a string in the editor box. DB path. And I want to go down. There is client open database DB path. If I search upwards, open DB path is string as database. In the database, I've got to tell it what the database is. So I can go upwards. There's only two. There's one there. There's one there. Okay, as database. So now I can look for where it was database. So if I change that to database, find next, dim as database, sample bank transactions. What's the problem with that? I don't have sample bank transactions. So you cannot execute a script on a file that doesn't exist within this particular project. If I want to get that file, I can go back into my desktop, because we do have it, Excel, and if you remember, it was within our tutorial, we had a file called, whoops, am I looking for Excel files? In our tutorial, we should have one called Excel. Am I in the right one? Idea projects. I've lost where I've put my Excel. It's not in samples, I don't think. It is in samples, I beg your pardon. If I look in sample, we had all of these. And if I pick up the bank transactions, tell it the first row is field names, okay. These are all my bank transactions. Now if I picked up that macro and tried to execute it, I'm looking for date. It's telling me it's invalid or currently in use. Sample bank transactions, IMD. Do we have sample bank transactions? Sample 3 bank transactions. So I need to change that name. I can delete it and change it back into sample bank transactions. So it will tell you if you're wrong, and then you need to go back and find out why you are wrong and bring it back in. Okay, so you can see there I'm in sample 3 web log. Here's my sample 3 bank transactions, but it shouldn't be sample 3, it should be sample. So if I was bringing up that one again, I've got a choice. I can either change the name of the file, or I can change it here and make it search sample 3 bank transactions. And that will also be sample 3 bank sample 3 bank transactions. And if I run it now, what am I looking at? That DP path again, and I need to go find, there we go, DP path sample 3 bank transactions. Deleting the old copy, and there's my analysis. Okay, so it tries to protect you from yourself getting it wrong, and it will tell you you've got the wrong name. You've got to go and look which name I'm looking in the wrong place. I've got the wrong file name. That's the one that we used last month. This is the one for July, not for June. So you may have to go back and change it. But it tries to tell you your script is wrong. This is the point at which it's wrong. So it was telling me that was the OpenDB, the path was wrong. On the previous one, where we looked at it with a numeric search, it was telling me it was wrong. Okay. So there are various ways you can do it, depending on the results that you're hoping to get. Okay. Let's take a look at another poll. And the other poll says, locating a script in the editor window requires the use of find, find next, toggle, debug, whichever you like. Okay, I will close that and share the results. And as you can see, we have a split vote between find and find next. The reason we've got a split vote is because you can use both. To find the string, you would use find. To find the next occurrence of the string, you would use find next, either downwards through the string or upwards through the string. Okay, now unlike some of the Microsoft software where when it gets to the end, if you start in the middle of a document and you're doing a hypertext search and you get to the end of the document, it wraps round and starts from the start again, carries on to where you are. This doesn't. So if you don't find what you're looking for going down, remember to also check going up, because it may be in a different place. Okay, let me close that poll, or hide the results of the poll, and let's take a look at importing and exporting. Okay, getting the information from the file. Now we all know how to do it using that import assistant, but if you were wanting to script it and then perhaps put a variable in, a dialog box in, where someone can enter the file that they want and give it over to someone as an executable. We can specify, create the required task, specify the output file name, specify any input file names that we want, perform the task, perform the cleanup, and then import the database in. And those are the steps that you would take. So let's take a look at the scripts that you would use for that type of thing. So if I open again, and this time I'm going to take a look at, you'll see import. Well, the one that we always started off with was that sales one. So let's have a look at importing a text file. Okay, in this case, I'm going to get my working directory, dim the path as a string, and the path will be the client working directory. Then I want to pick up 3 conversions provided with IDEA, sample customers, and I'm going to create those 3 export type databases. The first one is going to be a TSV database. So the first thing I want to do is delete it if it's already there. I will check for errors. If there's no errors, do nothing. And then I will create it. Dim the task as an export database. Set the DB as export database and perform the task. Okay, let me try running it. Okay, so it's created 3 different databases for me. Okay, it created a TSV, which is a notepad type report. It's created me an ASC, and it's created me an FXD database. Okay. Now if we look at how you would do that normally, if I take that customer database and I wanted to go and create those new ones, I could go in and I could say I want to index, I want to describe it in a certain order, or I want to write out a new form, a new file. I want to export the data. And we can look at up here, we've got a pile of different choices. If I look at more commands, these are additional commands that I can add up here. I can define exactly what I want to do. I want to append databases. I want to create new databases. I want to align. I want to export databases. There's where we are. I want to export a database. I want to export a text delimited database. I want to export a text fixed length database, etc. Now what we've done here, if we look in here, you can see we've exported 3 different types of database. So depending on what you're trying to do, you can have a string database, you can have a comma delimited database, you can have, so there's a string database with our FXD, excuse me, apologies. And you can create the different types of database. And again, you can see we've got the source code, and the source code itself consists of delete old, the export database, the ASC database, export with the FXD, and export the TSV rather. There's a main one which says call that one, call that one, call that one. Okay. So I've created those 3 pieces of text. I can then say go and call them. If I wish to change that again, there's my old path sample customers, create it, sample customers. And again, I could put that into a dialog box and ask someone, what file do you want to create? What file do you want to create it from? What do you want to call the file when you've output it? Okay. You've got all of these. Go through them at your leisure. You'll find that at the end of this I'll be recommending a book which is specific to IdeaScript, and it will show you how to do each one of these in turn. Okay. I didn't write the book, so I don't get any royalties. Just in case you think I'm trying to sell my own book. Okay. Now that was using a text file. If I looked at doing the same thing, but going and opening a macro, which is, for example, for a dbase file, I'm looking at, first find it, importing a dbase file. In the same way, I'm going to bring it in. There's my dbase file, sample dbase imd, open it. Okay. And it's going to tell me invalid macro name because I haven't created that dbase dbf. Okay. If I look at, for example, opening one to import rather, an AS400 file. There's our source code dimming the task. There's my sample AS400 IMD, and there's the defining the input data file and definition path because it's coming in from an AS400. So there's a file definition file, and there's the data file that comes in with it. And we can do all of these, and we can extract information. Once we've got it in, then we can extract the information that we want out of it. Okay. Now, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't normally do that. If you were going to import it, you would simply go in on your desktop, and I want to import a dbase file, and my dbase file is over here, and it's in wherever you want it. Tutorial, we don't have a dbase file in tutorial. Samples, we do have a dbase file. I'll bring it in, and I can add the fields that I want to bring in, etc. Save it, and so on. Now once I've done all of that, there's my dbase file. And again, I can go over to the history, look at my dbase import, and there it is there. Now I could take that and copy it in, but you see the dbase name is dbase1. Again, I could put an interactive dialog in and say, tell me which dbase file you want to import. Put that in there. Tell me where the file is. Put that in there. So instead of this being coming from there, I could put it into dialog and then give the user the option to select what they want at the time they're executing. Okay. Happy. Good, because that brings us to our third polling question. How do we define a string variable? How do we define a string variable? Now this is going back into stuff that we've already done. I'll give it a couple more seconds. close it, share the results. And the results are, again, somewhat split, with the majority going for dim string variable, which is effectively what you would do if you were trying to define a string variable. Okay. So where else do we go? Well, we were looking at bringing the data in. That's all very good. But the question is, once you've got the data in, what do you do with it? Well, typically, you're going to be doing that analysis that we've been doing. Could be stratification, random selection, summarization, developing pivot tables, etc. So let's take a look at some of the scripts that would result from doing those tasks. So if I open up, for example, pivot. Okay. Now remember, we did a pivot table. We did it before. Let me do it again. Let me shut that down. So I'll take my customer database and I'm going to create a pivot table. Pivot table was a piece of cake because all you had to do was give it the name and then tell it what you wanted. So I want to look by country, and I want to look at the, for argument's sake, the credit limits. Ooh, that's going to be a big one. Let's take status. And then we'll take our credit limit and we'll drop that into the data. So we've created our pivot table showing by country, by status, how much the credit limit was, and the total credit limits. Okay. If we looked at the history for that, there was my idea script at the bottom. And again, if I look at the idea script, if I come down, you can see open the customer database, set the task to DB stratification, include all fields, the result name will be that, the task name will be that, field to stratify will be credit limit, field to total will be credit limit. These are the stratifications, etc. Okay. Why is it giving me that? It's giving me that because what I'm looking at is the history for the file, not for the pivot table. There's the pivot table. And if I look at the history on that, I'm still getting the history for the file. So what I need to do is go in and have a look at my macros and take a look at my open my pivot table. Okay. And again, my main, if I look at the main says get the working directory, open the database, check for errors, remove the old results, and that's standard, the kind of thing you do every time you open a file. But there's my task name pivot table, add the row field credit limit, add the column field country, add the task data field, customer number, customers by credit limit, etc. And then run it. I've done it the other way around. There's my credit limits, there's my countries, and there's my totals. Okay. So that was looking at pivot tables. What else could we look at? Well, if I shut that one down and I close that down, back into my customer database, I could go in and open up one that said, for example, random selection. Once again, we've done a random selection before. This is how it looks in the text. There's all that stuff about opening it up, picking up my, delete the old stratified random selection, open the stratified random database, etc. Stratify on these bands, perform the task, and so on. Okay, so there's a straightforward stratification and a random selection. Again, if I wanted to look at summarization, if I open up, I take a look at my summarization. I'm setting it up, I'm doing all the garbage at the front again, and then I want to summarize, so to configure the task, the field to summarize will be that, the field to total will be that, the output name will be that, create a percent field, no, statistics to include, if you want statistics coming out, perform the task, etc., open the database. And again, if you're doing that summarization, deleting it, creating it, and there's that summarization, which we've had before. Okay, so the question really is not so much how you do it, but what you would want to do and why you would want to use a script. Well, you don't have to use a script. You can do it by using the standard analysis tools and techniques. The reason for using a script is simply to avoid having to do it over and over and over again. Okay? And the reason for knowing what the script actually says is if it is giving me something and I didn't write the script, another auditor wrote it and ran the script 2 years ago, it was run again last year, now I'm running it this year, I want to know what that script actually does before I do it. So even if it's for joining files, joining our sales to a customer, there's the script to join sales to customers. So I'm going to pick up the field, I'm going to pick up the database, I'm going to index it, and then I'm going to call or relate. So I'm calling the text import, sales text, then I'm calling modify it. So if I look at each of these in turn, I've got my import, text import. There's a piece that does the import. Oh yeah, it's bringing in that file. I'm happy with that. What does it do then? Well, it modifies that field. Ooh, what is it modifying? It's opening that, it's doing that, it's picking that up, it's changing that record, it's replacing that number field with that. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's doing what I want it to do. What else does it do? It indexes it. Well, I presume it indexes it correctly, but let me just check. Yep, it's going to pick it up on customer number ascending. That's what I want. Ah, no. This year I want to do it in descending. So I'll change that A to a D. And when I execute it now, it will index it in descending order instead of ascending order. So it can be as simple as that. That instead of having to do the whole job again, I can pick up what was done before and say on this occasion I want to change that. I don't want to do it in descending order or ascending order, I want it in descending order. I don't want that transaction date this time, I'll take that out. So I can vary the script before I execute it again. If you're going to vary the script, I'll try that again, then my advice would be to include another piece of text to say 2015 run in descending order, or whatever. Simply so that when this is run, you can go back at some future stage and say, but hang on a second, this looks different to what was done last year. What was different? For 2015 we ran it in descending order, not in ascending order. Okay, just put some narrative in there so that, remember, it may not be you who's looking at it. It could be a totally different auditor. And you're going to have to make it clear to them not only what you were doing, but why you were doing it that way. But by the same token, it could be you a year down the line, and it does not impress the client when you scratch your head and say, I wonder what I was doing differently then. So it's helpful to send a note to yourself as to what you were doing. Okay. And that brings us to our fourth polling question. If we want to execute a task until a condition becomes true, now this is one that we did on Tuesday. We can do the task and loop, do the task and loop until, or we can do until something happens and loop, or we can do something and loop while a condition exists, or do while a condition exists and then loop around it. So we're wanting to do a task until a condition comes true. Okay, I'll close the tab, close the poll and share the results. It was a tricky one because it's 3 days since you've done it, and if you haven't practiced it at all in the meantime, you're trying to remember what it was that we talked about 3 days ago. But the effect was, when we look at the question, it was do a task until something is true. So it would be do something, loop until something is true. So it would be A. Okay. Otherwise you're going to say do until a condition is true and loop something. Okay. Let me close that. As far as doing graphs is concerned, it's always a favorite one for auditors to produce a graph that someone else can then look at and make more sense of. So again, we can have a look at some of the graphs if we open one of these scripts. And I can say that I want to, for example, look at developing an item, let's say do a trend analysis, and then do a graph of it. So there's my analysis, pick it up, check for errors, etc. Remove the old results and then configure the task. Task in this case is I want to do a trend analysis on heating costs, etc. Produce that, perform the task, clear memory. Now in doing it, in running that, it's going to tell me I don't actually have that database. So I'll need to pick up my database, my Advanced Statistical Methods database. My Advanced Statistical Methods Again, I can find, if I go in on my desktop, it's an Excel sheet, spreadsheet. It's going to come from my samples. If I look up here, leaving off weblog, there's my advanced statistical methods one. First row is field names. Okay, so I've got all kinds of months with average temperatures at various branches, heating costs, salaries within that branch, average salaries, and so on and so forth. So now if I go on my trend analysis and run it, once again it's telling me my open database path. If I look down there, it's sample 4. Because I brought it in multiple times in the past, I'm going to have to change that to advanced sample 4. If I run it now, it's telling me that it cannot find the average heating cost. Do that again, average heat cost, the field was not found. Because we haven't got average heat cost, we've got year average heat cost. So again, where it said average heat cost, I can search for it. Heat cost wasn't there. Where was what I'm looking for? Year average heat cost was not found. Year average heat cost, that one there. I've got year AVRG. And run it. And it's giving me my graphs. Okay. So, as I say, it tries wherever possible to protect you from yourself. It's not always successful, but it makes the effort. Other things that it will try and help you do include our polling question number 4, which we've done, which brings us to our polling question number 5. Polling question number 5 says to define the database. How do we define a database? Sorry. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think on that one. Still got a couple. Okay, we'll close the poll, share the results. Okay, remember what we're looking for to define a database is dim database as database. DimDB as database name will tell it the name of the database. Okay, so let's take a look at what else we can do within our scripting. If we look at scripts, we can do all kinds of exotic things. For example, if we were looking at the data and we were looking at trying to find data, search data, sort out errors in the data, okay? We can, if I look at the macros and open up, we could look at, for example, our data types. I'm looking for data errors. Which I've created, and I can't remember what I called it. Well, it's embarrassing when you can't remember what you've called things. Never mind, we can do it again. If we look at picking up data errors, one of the problems that you've got when you import something is that the data can be corrupt. Okay, and it may be a question that I need to find corrupt data within a data file. And if we look at always useful help file, oops, data errors, you'll see that when you import data, you can have errors in data types. Different types of data, could be character, numeric, etc. But if we look at the data types and have a look at it within IdeaScript, each variable has to be one set of predefined categories of a specific type of data. Remember we looked at that yesterday, sorry, not yesterday, on Tuesday, when we looked at the different definitions of data and the different types of data, and this would hold that and that would hold this, etc. Sometimes you can get that wrong. So you can fix the data. You can eliminate erroneous data. You can correct data. For example, I did a course on IDEA, and we looked at a particular file. Now the file was coming in with corrupt data in numeric fields, in record lengths, etc. And before we could do the analysis, we had to clean up that data. Let me see if I can find the file and bring one in. A file with erroneous data. Where would I find that? Let me look at Excel. And let me have a look within my samples. I'm not actually sure if this has got erroneous data. I don't see any in there. Let me just bring in the suppliers one. Okay. You could, for example, be given a file within there could be an alpha. Okay, now That's a supplier number. We know that that field is numeric, or do we? That's actually an alpha character. If we look at the definition of the data in that, we want to modify that field, you can see that it's a character field. As a result, it's possible that someone could have put something in there with an, instead of 10229, it could be A0229. I might wish to eliminate that. So what I could do is do an analysis and do a direct extract where that particular, I'm going to put it to extract 2, where that particular field name, supplier number, or going into my character definitions, my left-hand side, okay, the number of the leftmost characters, string and the number. If I said, instead of supplier number, I said left supplier number, comma, and the number itself, okay, the number of leftmost cast, I want a 1, is equal to an A. But I'll have to tell it, quotes, A, quotes. Okay. So I could pick that up and I could eliminate that, and I could say I want to select only where it's equal to that or only where it's not equal to that, and clean the data up accordingly. And that sometimes happens. Remember, our supplier number is alpha. What I could do is I could create a new field, we'll append a new field, and it's going to be a virtual numeric field, and we're going to call it supplier numeric. The parameter is going to be, well, there's my supplier number. How do I get to numeric? Well, if I look under my numerics, I will see val. I want the value out of that string called supplier number. So it converts a number stored with a character data type to numeric. It's giving me 0 decimals, which I want, and it's created it there as a numeric field. If I then wanted to do any comparison to another file which has got the supplier number as a numeric field, whatever. But if I look at the history on that, you can see there's my record extraction. There's my IDEA script. If I say I want to copy all the IDEA script, then there's my import, my direct extraction, and call that append field. And there's my append field, set the database, set the database table, create a new field called supplier numeric, etc. And there's a value of supplier number, 0 decimal places, append the field, etc. So everything you do, any kind of cleanup, you can put into a script file, and then when you execute it, you can automatically clean it up before you do any analysis. Okay. Other things for you to do. Let me go back in here. Polling question. Our last polling question. Aren't you disappointed? Numbers themselves are normally defined as numbers, Boolean, integers, or string. Give it a couple of seconds. And we'll close the poll. Had to make sure 100% voted for that one, because that's our last poll for the series. If I share the results, you can see we have primarily integers, some people looking on them as numbers. And if we go back, if I close that vision of the poll, okay, you lost power in your office, you're on your laptop now and you're back in class. That means you probably missed a couple of the polling questions. So what to do is have a look and put the answers through and send them through to Jim on an email. You did answer them. Excellent. Okay, in that case, no problem. So the last one was, is it going to be numeric or is it going to be numbers or integers? If you look at that, it's saying here is a field. The field is, this is our virtual field. Field type is going to be numeric. It's an integer because there are 0 decimal places. Okay. So let me close down on the sharing of that and hide the poll. Okay, having done polling question number 6, other readings. This is probably the best book that you will find on idea scripting. As far as I know, there isn't an ebook version. There might be, but I don't know of it. You'd need to check on Amazon. But Guiding Idea Script, the Definitive Guide, Mastering Idea Script, the Definitive Guide by John Paul Mueller, is published by Wiley Publishers. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've done over the whole course of this series. We've looked at the benefits of cats. Why go for cats in the first place? Why bother? Because of the handling of volumes. In today's environment, with the big files that we've got, in some places truly enormous files, you cannot audit to any degree through the computer without using cats. You can create outputs which are textual outputs. You can create outputs which are going to be graphs, which are going to be diagrams. You can create outputs which are files which are then going to go on for further processing. You can audit enormous files incredibly quickly. And if you've created scripts, you don't have to go through the whole audit again. You can simply call in that script, run it again. If it's a regular occurring audit. If it's regular but slightly different, you can call in the script, amend the script, and run it again. If it's different every time you run it, every month you need to do it in a different month with a different file name, etc., then you can create a script with a dialogue. You can do it once, then create a script with the dialogue, copy the script in, create a dialogue to add on that will request you to enter that variable, which is the month, and pick that up. Hang on. Apologies again, I'm coughing. You can pick that month up from the dialogue and put that into your script and run it with that. So you don't have to go through a convoluted process every time. Your time to audit can be substantially reduced. And that means that you are free to spend time reading the newspapers. No, you're free to spend time looking at what's come out and saying, what does that tell me? What does that tell me about the audit objective? Why was I looking at this data in the first place? We've looked at doing it using scripts this past 2 times. You don't have to do it with scripts. You don't have to be a programmer. If you do want to do it using scripts, you don't have to be an expert basic programmer to do it. You can get the idea to create the initial script for you and then take it from there. And that means that you don't have to go hat in hand to IT every time saying, please sir, can you write me a program that will extract this and analyze it this way? Oh sorry, I got that wrong, could you analyze it that way instead? Determining the appropriate CAT boils down to knowing what it is that you want to know. You need to know where to look and therefore what technique you will use to look at it. And there's a variety of audit techniques, application audit techniques. You may want to verify the processing itself or simply verify the results of the processing. But the trick in all cases is know what it is that you want to know before you start. Browsing takes a lot of time and therefore the cost of auditors takes a lot of money, and it's not impressive because it gives the impression that you don't know what the hell you're looking for and you don't know what the hell you're doing. That brings us to the end of the idea series. Are there any questions? This is your final opportunity, other than by coming back to Jim or myself afterwards with questions. This is your final opportunity during the webinars to ask any questions. Anything through at your end, Jim?
No, I have no questions on my end.
Well, let me click on to the supplemental information.
Okay. As you can see there, this is the additional information that we have available through AuditNet. There is a link to the Introduction to AuditNet for IDEA users. That's a video. It was put together by Don Sparks at Automation, the U.S. distributor for Caseware IDEA. So you can watch that video and you can see how you can access the AuditNet content. There's information there about a website from Dave Kader, also computer-assisted audit tools and techniques, as well as links to software demos for ACL, IDEA, as well as Arbutus. And then, of course, there's other AuditNet documents, and those are by request, but if you are a subscriber, you should be able to find those in the template section and be able to download those. So, Richard, I don't have any additional information to provide. We do have another series coming up on IT audit, and I believe that will be starting in April.
Let me just check my diary.
I believe it's going to be starting on...
It should be starting on the 28th of April.
April 28th we'll be starting that series. So if you have...
And that's not specific to CATs, it's widespread on IT audit.
Okay. Very good. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and for those of you that have been here for the whole series, we do appreciate your support. We look forward to you coming back and joining us again. We will be sending out the link to the recording for today, and as well as the CPE certificates. The CPE certificates for today's session you should really get by tomorrow. So again, thank you very much, and we do appreciate your support, your continued support, and we look forward forward to welcoming you back to join us again. Richard, have a great day out in Colorado, and I'll sign off from Washington, D.C. So everybody have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Take care, guys.